Now, from the UTV News Centre, it's UTV Live.
Good evening, I'm Paul Clark and I'm reporting to you live tonight from a road near Rostrevor where over the weekend 4 police officers died in a tragic road accident. Tributes have been pouring in for the 4 young men, all reported to be in their 20s and 30s. Tonight we talked to the taxi driver who tried to help the 4 get out of their vehicle as it started to burn.
I don't think they could get up what was happening. They knew the people were there and they knew that there was nothing they could do for them.
We'll be hearing from family friends who knew the men.
They're totally devastated and really at this stage they hardly know what has hit them.
It's the biggest single loss of police life since the beginning of the ceasefire. But what went wrong? An investigation has begun to find out how it happened.
And also making the headlines tonight. Workers at the Calcas engineering plant near Londonderry stage a sit-in after they were told that the plant will close with the loss of 90 jobs. And there's more good news for traders in border areas who are already benefiting from the high euro as the Chancellor drops VAT from 17.5% to 15%. But first, for tonight's top story, it's back to Paul Clark in Rostrevor.
The whole community is in mourning this evening following the deaths of 4 young PSNI officers in County Down over the weekend. Police still have to officially name them, but they've been named locally. 39-year-old Declan Green was related to the Green family, which lost 3 generations in the Tullymurray Lass tragedy 6 years ago. He's understood to have been a married father of 4. One of the youngest to die, 24-year-old Constable Kevin Gorman from Drummondess, had recently become a father to a baby girl. Constable Kenny Irvine was a part-time community police officer. He was in his 30s and from Kilkeel, married with a young son. And James McGee, who was in his 20s and from the Newcastle area, was described as an officer with a great community spirit and a promising future in the PSNI. We have a series of reports this evening, the first from Ivan Little, who's been finding out what happened, and he's been speaking to the taxi driver who tried in vain to get the police officers out of their vehicle.
Alone with her grief, a PSNI colleague of 2 of the 4 policemen killed in the horrific crash near Warren Point early yesterday morning visited the scene today to pay her respects to the victims. Relatives and friends also left floral tributes. Attached to the flowers for Kenny Irvine, a poignant message from his wife Andrea and his son Callum. The PSNI are still trying to find out what caused the police Shogun Jeep to crash, but the markings left by accident investigators suggest the vehicle may have clipped something on the left-hand side of the road before it veered across the narrow carriageway into a wall and crash barrier beside the Moygannon Bridge. It's believed the 4x4 had spun 180 degrees and that the rear passenger side took most of the impact before the vehicle burst into flames. The police officers were on their way to Rostrevor from Warren Point to help colleagues who'd made several urgent calls for assistance. A taxi driver told me how he and local residents fought in vain to save the policemen.
It wasn't a big ball of flames at the time, it was just the Jeep had maybe just caught fire. I didn't see it catching, I just came across it as it was catching, and I noticed people, there was a few people, would say residents must be, were running around just sort of in panic. The flames were too big, there was no fire extinguisher was going to extinguish it, and then I heard someone shouting, there's people in there, and I just thought, well, my best thing, I ran towards it again. I seen a few people beating what seemed to be metal bars, and I think there was a man had a block or a brick, he picked it off the road. He was beating off the windows, but they were having no joy. So I just joined them and just hit the fire extinguisher off the windscreen. But the police were arriving on the scene. They were just running around in circles. I don't think they could get over what was happening. They knew the people were there and they knew that there was nothing they could do for them. There was one woman, a policewoman, and I heard her shouting a name of someone that was in it.
Another driver who was on the scene here within seconds told me that no one inside the police vehicle stood a chance. He was too upset to record an interview. where he was on his way to the funeral of a friend's sister, killed in another road accident just a few miles from here at the weekend. A man who lives nearby said colleagues of the police officers did all in their power to save them.
The flames in the sky was terrible. Like, they couldn't get near it at the time. They're at it. That's what coming from it all the time, like back and forth trying to get near it. Tried their best.
It's been an awful experience for you.
It was just bad for me. I was thinking of family now is the worst thing. It's just God have the family, you know. They've lost a mother or a father or a son or an uncle or cousin. You know, it's hard to get over when they were young too.
That report there from Ivan Little. Well, now Kilkeel is in mourning this evening for two of the part-time police officers who came from the predominantly fishing town. Kenny Irvine and Declan Green, who lived just a mile from each other, died together on Sunday morning. Jane Lochry has spent the day in the town.
At Kilkeel Harbour, the lifeboat flag flies at half-mast in tribute to the two part-time police officers from the town who lost their lives in this tragedy. Just 6 months ago, Kenny Irvine, who was in his early 30s, and his wife Andrea were celebrating the birth of their son Callum after losing a newborn baby last year. Now his wife also has to bury her husband on Wednesday, their 4th wedding anniversary.
I'm sure any mum, wife listening to this can maybe only begin to understand the devastation that is felt there, and indeed I might quickly add in all the other homes, because you know, someone has said that tears are not something that you can divide up and put into a little box. Tears are tears, and there's a lot of tears in the community, right across the community, right across the spectrum, and our hearts and thoughts and prayers go out to all these homes.
Kenny's colleague, 39-year-old Declan Green, leaves behind his wife Roshing and their 4 children. The youngest is only 3, and the eldest, 19-year-old Rory, who was enjoying a gap year in Australia, is now making the sad journey home. 6 years ago, Declan's uncle, Michael Green, his cousin and his cousin's son, who was just 8 years old, lost their lives in a fishing tragedy.
Roshing is in a state of shock, and it's still not real for her, you know. For her, it's still a dream that she has to waken from, and maybe over these next, you know, particularly the next day, I suppose, when Declan's remains are returned to the family and Rory comes home from Australia, maybe then, you know, then it becomes a reality, and that's the real hurt, the real pain sinks in.
Family friends say Kenny had just joined the force a year ago, while Declan had served for 2.5 years.
Well, I first come across Declan as a pupil of St Louis Grammar School. I was his maths teacher. Declan was a lovely lad, and he hasn't